Google says it's 4 o'clock, so we'll call our meeting to order. Are you going to do the roll call? Is that what you just said?
I think I can do it.
All right.
Ms. Tompkins?
Here.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Here.
Mr. Averill?
Here.
Mr. Kempla?
Here.
Mr. Patient?
Here.
Mrs. Fall?
Here.
Everyone's here, except for Nate.
Nate is excused absent. All right. Nick, was our meeting appropriately noticed?
Yes, the meeting was posted here at the campus and sent to City Hall and Library for posting. It was also sent out to various meeting outlets.
Very good. Number 3, public comment period. At this time, the commission would recognize members of the public who've indicated a desire to address the commission. Do we have any members of the public to address the commission today? Seeing none. Number 4, commissioner and staff comments. Do we have any commissioner comments before we get going? Natasha?
I just wanted to say that the glue meeting that was held on Thursday was super interesting, and it was really nice to get a bigger perspective of energy needs in the states and transmission. So generation and transmission. So that was really fascinating.
Glad you went. Glad you said that because that saves me. Would you suggest that other commissioners attend those types of events
I
too?
would suggest it
Thank
because it
you.
helps from just looking at Marshfield to looking at like, oh, this is where we have to get our energy from.
Thank you. And then we have a new commissioner tonight. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Gabrielle Balke. I've lived in Marshfield for almost 20 years now. I was on the Economic Development Board for 3 years. And when this opportunity came up, I was just really excited to learn a new part of the city. I have been a project manager for about 11 years, and I also am a co-owner in a food truck business here in town, Stone Press. And I love learning, so I'm really excited about this. Right now I'm working on my PhD in education, so learning is a passion of mine, and this is a very exciting opportunity, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome to the team. No shortage of things to learn.
Good.
Do we have any staff comments tonight?
Yes, we've got a couple. Melissa?
Take that. So we just wrapped up last week. If you weren't aware, it was actually Public Power Week. And we did a variety of activities, just recap what we kind of put out there in the community. We started off actually the week, the mayor came and presented us, did a proclamation declaring Public Power Week and recognizing those efforts, recognizing us as being a public power provider. And then throughout the week, we had a coloring contest that kids could participate in. We set up a photo booth with props over at the library for people to take selfies and tag us, and then sent a couple linemen over to do story time, and they take a bucket truck, and the kids can come out after story time and explore and learn about our equipment. And then we also sponsored senior bingo at the community center, so a little bit of something for everybody.
Next, Jessica.
Last week we put out the fall customer newsletter, and if you didn't get the email about that, it is located on the website under In the News.
And then Tony, quick update on mutual.
Yeah. So last week, Hurricane Milton hit Florida square in the Tampa area, and at the time, Florida had about 3 million people without power. MU joined in with about 21 other municipal utilities in Wisconsin to send crews down to respond to one of the municipal utilities. Lakeland Electric had, I think, just about 40,000 customers without power as of when the storm went through. They're down to just about 3,000 customers without power right now. They expect full restoration by Wednesday sometime. Wednesday afternoon is what they're projecting right now. So really grateful for our guys to make that volunteer effort to drive down there and work alongside approximately 600 other linemen in that Lakeland area. So Lakeland is kind of halfway between Tampa and Orlando. I think there's about 150,000 people in that area. So pretty good sized city, but crews made relatively short work of getting everyone back on safely and quickly as possible. So.
Item number 5, election of officers. This is the kickoff or reformation meeting for the commission year, which runs starting with this month through next October. something like that, next September. Yeah. Each year, we have to elect a president to the commission and a secretary for the commission. So we'll do the first and then the second. So nominations for president.
Nominate you, Mike?
Thanks. Any other nominations for president?
You need a second?
Oh, yeah, I probably do at some point when we close the
Oh,
nominations.
okay.
Any others? All right,
I make a motion that we close the nominations.
all right. Motion and second?
Close or
Yeah,
second?
Second.
motion. Good, motion to close, second, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We'll open the floor for nominations for secretary. Whereupon, I would nominate Paul.
Yeah.
And I'll second that.
Second that. Anybody want a motion to close or nominate someone?
Motion to close?
Motion to close and move on. Second that by Mr. O'Reilly. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do you have the note-taking
I
equipment?
have a pen. Maybe with a lot of help.
Just has your back.
All right. Moving on to number 6, strategic plan review.
So tonight is the continuing discussion from previous meetings on the strategic plan. So tonight, we're kind of looking at those first 2 pages, talking about the mission, vision, value statements, and objectives. Those are the items that you guys have reviewed over the last few months. I did note in the packet, there was that one omission by myself that I highlighted in yellow, just to bring that to your attention, that I did put back in. So really looking to make sure the consensus is there on those items. And then pages 3 through 7 are just a draft of the initiatives that the staff and I have put together. This is kind of just a first glance at it. And if there's any initial feedback, that's great. Otherwise, we can look for approvals in November and December. Really want to get this finalized by the end of the year. We'll probably work with Jess and she can make it look nice and pretty and what have you, for presentation purposes. So,
Because you didn't expect to have staff initiatives at this meeting.
the original plan wasn't to, but we'd like to be overachievers, and it just came together quickly. So we brought it for your at least initial review on it.
Okay.
I can go through it if you'd like. Otherwise, maybe just tonight into the next meeting, you can review it, and then we can dive more into depth in November. And I should note that if you look at the on those pages, it's really the it's you'll see where it's you have the objectives, number 1, 2, 3, and then you see initiatives, and then below initiatives in the box, you'll see usually around 2 to 3 listed. Those are the kind of the initiatives that the staff then will use to run forward.
Is there anything on there anybody wants to talk about or have immediate feedback? Otherwise, we'll push it to next month. Yes, Natasha?
This is just a little thing for the mission. I feel like, and please, whoever does editing, tell me if they agree or not. I feel like there needs to be a comma after customer service. It's like that Oxford comma thing, so that you don't go providing excellent customer service and delivering. You go providing excellent customer service and delivering safe for life. So that's just a little thing, but it might read that.
I see consensus there. Got it in front of you?
I see it. Either way for us, fine.
Seems indifferent. That's advanced. I'm not sure I know the answer.
It didn't flag it when I put it in there as a edit, but we'll dive into it a little bit more and bring it.
Anything else? Okay, we'll see that again next month. You've got a KPI update.
Yes, so tonight is the quarterly update of the KPI for review. The focus on this time is the results for the third quarter. As you can see, all the items are green. In general, this shows that overall the selected items are performing as expected. Welcome any questions or feedback anyone may have. And I should note that the leadership team and I have talked later this year, early first quarter, we'll go back to the definition documents. If you remember, we had definition documents that kind of define each of the KPIs. We'll go back to those and revisit them and see if there's any tweaks or adjustments that need to be done.
Any questions on the KPI report?
Nice to see green.
Okay. Moving on. Number 8, utilities role in economic development.
So, like the other items, this kind of continues that discussion that we've had on economic development. The packet included, as you requested last time, the job description for the city's community development director. Through my discussions with the administrator, it's my understanding that this position is generally unchanged from its previous format. Really, the change was in title only, and that was the whole support. That was from feedback from the industry, and I hope that would help with filling of the position whenever it's posted. So there's that part. I will note that I did meet with the city administrator and the executive director of Mackey last week as well. I think in general we agreed. We believe and agreed that with good coordination and collaboration and communication, each entity could maintain staff to support economic development in different ways. As we reviewed the format and staffing, I believe it would be best for each entity to have some level of staff that support economic development. The city's role would include, those areas that they've always handled, if you will, including like the zoning, the plan commission, permitting, inspection, TIF and DID, the CDA funding, and property development as it relates to the Creek Business Park or the industrial park. Mackey would focus on the smaller businesses and the entrepreneurial type support, along with workforce development and attraction. And then, as we discussed previously, that MU would focus more on the larger businesses and the proactive promotion of vacant land. For all, it would be relatively easy, I think, to set up metrics to track, the reach and the output of these various positions. The metrics could change over time, and obviously we need to consider the effort along with outcomes, due to a very highly competitive space that we're in. And then that kind of takes care of the people and the business side of it, the place piece, that last leg. I think that continues to be a combination of all the groups, also the community groups. If you think about the pickleball project, that came together from a community group. And I think there's obviously opportunities for that to continue. And I hear that there's others that are looking at helping support different projects. So those are my brief updates. Welcome to feedback you guys have.
Yeah.
Is the focus on like futures forward, or is it on existing businesses, or both?
Both. So as far as what the utility would kind of focus on, or
All of them.
yeah, it would be both on a retention, expansion, and then new development.
The previous discussion, your thought was that the utility is well situated to have those relationships with the existing businesses in town for retention and growth. So that would be an area that I think you're thinking the utility would focus on.
Yeah, and we talked about, other utilities have what's called like a key accounts program, business development specialists that focus on different customers. That's kind of the framework, if you will, that the utility would handle, is that they have someone that's kind of focused on the larger customers, and then obviously to be defined.
So when we last had this discussion, it seemed like we got stuck at the point where, how are we going to measure it so we can decide who should be doing it? Any thoughts on that since last month?
I looked at the, what Nick put out here, and I really liked the way it's set up there. It was very clear, it was easy to read, the requirements, and the measurables at the bottom. I thought were excellent.
Thought that was good. Yeah.
I think too, you can see what the city's job description is, it being pretty evident. although the roles can be overlapping to a degree, there's certainly enough separation, warrant both. And that became more clear as, seeing those two job descriptions.
Okay. Yes, Natasha?
Could there be anything in the measurables to talk about the three entities working together? Is there a way to make that measurable?
You could define a set that meeting schedule or something like that, I guess, and ensure that they're meeting on whatever frequency, that makes sense. Otherwise, it could just be, I don't have it in front of me, like an objective or not necessarily a metric per se, but just that it should be a direct collaboration with the other entities on every aspect that is pertinent.
I like where you're going with it. Instead of being a measurable in the job description, what if there was a framework written up that kind of explained the stool concept that Nick's been using, that all three or all entities that had a position kind of signed on to and showed where their job description fit within the framework? So flip it around.
I do feel like those three entities, it would be good if they touched base frequently, just so that they weren't like, oh, you were working on that, I was working on that too, like there's not overlap or something that's totally different because you assume the other group was doing it. I don't know how to write that into the job description, but it would be good to have that up front, that we would want them to meet and communicate.
I think the organizations have to agree on that.
Yes, absolutely.
I think in the state of digital technology, with like Google Docs and ShareDrive, there's a lot of ways to make documents easily shareable, if you will, or active. So that might be another means to develop that collaboration.
Have we, at what point will we delve into how it's getting funded? There's a lot of concern at the city that it's going to take away from the dividend, so I think that has to be I think that discussion needs to be done well with both groups and staff and all that kind of stuff. That's the elephant in the room.
Not sure where to go with that.
I think, well, I recognize that's a piece of the process here that has to be identified. I think we all have to, and I wrote down next steps in my head. And I think kind of got to the detailed level a little bit, but we haven't stepped up to the higher level to say what is the city community's goal and vision, and then how does our utility goal and vision fit within that? That's still an elephant out there that has to be defined, because if you have three entities that are doing different things, but they're not going towards a common goal and vision here, they could go sideways pretty quickly and could have discourse.
So, would it be appropriate to say, for example, let's just imagine the 2nd Street project, and how would all three entities work on that together? Where would we see who would fit in what pieces and stuff?
Yeah, obviously the city is taking the lead on that one from a development perspective with the Weinbrenner and obviously the streets, the buildings, so on. So I can see that part. Obviously what's a little bit complicated there is actually an engineering firm that's supporting that, or consultant, I should say, that's playing a part as well. So you have to understand that. I think it's really maybe, one of the things that we need on every project is drivers. And maybe that group, maybe the three-headed monster training, if you will, is the driver that's going to help propel that forward, and then they're each determining what the tasks are or what the needs are, and dividing that up based on skill set or based on resources, whatever might make the most sense.
And then would you see Mackie doing little businesses, maybe if there's little shops, and maybe the utilities doing like big apartment building, you know what I mean? Like there could be different levels of economic development, even in that one street.
Right, yeah, and maybe it's you know, sit down and develop a plan of saying, all right, here are the target audiences that we want to hit, and then figuring out a marketing campaign, and then from there realizing, all right, that makes sense, let me use some other, you know, framework. Or it's possible that, you know, in that regards, the utility doesn't have a role because it just doesn't make sense. Maybe the other ones make more sense, you know, I think it's really getting to the table and discussing it and figuring out with the group what makes the most sense to get outcomes that are measurable through the measurements.
All of that is good. Given the vision that the city has for Second Street and the plan that's already developed, where is there a hole that the utility could fill in that plan, or is it, it's all set, really there isn't a hole in the utility?
I think that we don't have developers yet. I think Vanderwall will be focusing on that one building, but that entire corridor, there's opportunities for all developers. You know, so would there be big developers that keep it? Because if you look at the plan that they drew, there was a lot of like housing, like, which would be a big developer coming in and building all that, which would take a lot of electricity.
Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, well, first I'm glad that you met with the three entities, because I think that's extremely important. And was there a consensus that all three entities felt that it would be a workable, I guess, to combine and yet keep the roles separate?
I think this was a high-level discussion, and I think there was consensus around the framework of the high-level discussion, but obviously we get into the
Yeah.
weeds and the details.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective right now, we're kind of looking at some of the details that are going to work themselves out through the process, because if you look at this role getting filled, what happens with that person is going to depend a lot on their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And the same thing with development in the city, with what happens there. I think that could be kind of a ever-evolving situation to work on it, but I like the concept. I think even Second Street, I mean, it's nice to have more parties involved, that people have different contacts, there's relationships built, it's all going to help through the process, so.
Did we make a proposal to the other two entities that the utility would be willing to do X? That's the next stop. What's the next step?
I mean, I feel like if the dividend was still given to the city and this position was not funded out of the city's dividend, I think it would be smoothly, easy. I think there's gonna be a lot of rough waters if this takes away from
Yeah, I think that made it very clear to us.
it. So I don't know what the next step is for that.
Do you believe, I mean, a number of you have been on the Economic Development Board historically, and I know that over time, one of the things that was talked about quite a bit was should funding be used for operation and maintenance type activities, for project capital study type projects. And I don't, is there a, now the not in place, is there a thought on how that's going to, where those funds are going to be focused? Are they going to be focused in areas where there will be a return from an investment in Munzo Plaza or Second Street type projects? Or is it going to be a return based on positions or labor that's then doing the other activities?
I think the position, the city is sort of at this moment saying we're gonna use the dividend to fund the position the city's gonna have. Sort of so that, but that's not all of the dividend, obviously. They're also funding the Wenzel coordinator half-time. Mackey and Main Street Marshfield are also coming out of the dividend. And then they're using any sort of economic development like zoning and planning that we don't have staff for is also going to be paid out. It hasn't been like through the budget process, but that's the plan. If it's like new people coming in, it's not like, yeah. So business, zoning and planning.
So I attended the city council meeting 2 back, where discussion of what economic development is and isn't was on the agenda. And I came away from that discussion not knowing any more about what economic development is or isn't than before it. Now it sounds like there's been movement in the city to find out what economic development might be to spend that money on. It would have been nice to hear about. Still would like to know, what is economic development from that perspective?
I mean, I think the position of the city would be more of the part of the stool that's the business, supporting business when you're doing like the planning, the zoning, the coordination of the business. Whether it's coming in, but they're not doing the promotion. And I think that there is definitely a hole there for finding businesses and bringing them in. It's a huge hole.
So my time on the economic development was before Paul's, maybe 10 years ago. 6 years, 7, somewhere.
I was on there for 5 or 6.
I was on it the year that Steve came to the economic development for the first time and took money out of the 205 fund to help fund the development department. So prior to that, none of that was considered economic development. And now, if I'm hearing right, the whole community, the whole position is going to be economic development?
I don't think all of it is. I think some of it is sort of administration. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one. I don't know what percentage of the position.
Has there been any conversation about the 3 entities having 1 person and contributing 30% of that person? And kind of having that person report to all 3 agencies, being this in between person. I mean, that kind of throws a wrench and takes it in a little bit different direction, but like, I was just curious about that topic of thought.
I think from my perspective, looking at it, it hasn't, and I think the reason it hasn't is that the workload is between what's going on with a full-time position at the city, full-time position at Mackey, and now one at the utility, the workload is more than 1 person could handle.
And different skill sets in the different parts of the job.
Yeah, that's all, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And that was going to be my question. I see value in this, even if one of the other entities doesn't want to join in for whatever reason. I still see value in this for the utility. To have a position to take care of these responsibilities.
Which puts us at the elephant in the room that Natasha keeps bringing up. Where would we fund it from if we didn't use the money we've traditionally used for economic development?
That would be another question.
Which potentially, I mean, the dividend is it's the ATC plus, isn't it the 25%, or is it only the 25%?
Dividend, as you guys mandated, was the ATC
Right.
and 25%.
So what if so 75% is left? What if part of that was the utilities position out of that 75%?
Keep in mind that 75% is just, you won't see as much of it tonight because of the budgets, but next month when we do the cash flow, you'll see how that's helping subsidize or support other projects like Melissa and Jessica talked about 120 days of ways of giving. Those are funding that we're helping with that. You provided funding for pickleball, funding from the scholarship. There's a number of other things that are coming out of those dollars. So if we take those dollars away and go right to economic development, that really ties our hands in other ways. Plus, it also is when we look at our capital projects and our improvements for our facilities, we haven't really dove into, and I'm not sure we'll get there tonight, but in the cash policy, we talk about having earmarks for different types of, substation improvements and things like that. Those are what some of those dollars are going to help contribute to as well. So we just, to take the 75%, when interest rates are high, maybe there's some money there potentially, but when interest rates are low, as they were prior to 2018, there was no interest earnings, so.
That's a very, very, very variable portion. So, historically, the utility commission has adopted the position that economic development is a good thing for the city. And having come up before for discussion many times, always went back to the position of, let's write a check, which was the dividend, and let the city do it. And they always had the economic development board in place to act as their action arm. You could argue that that worked. You could argue that it didn't work, depending on how you want to measure results. We never put any strings on the money that was given to the city beyond saying it's for economic development and went into the 205 fund. This discussion started with not sure what the city's going to do, what role should the utility play, but we're talking about the same pot of money, however we decide to slice it. The other money that the utility has, as Nick said, is pretty well committed already. Yes.
This is why I asked for this to be on the council meeting last time, to define, or at least get a loose definition of what economic development is. We've run into defining our scope of what we're trying to do does not come into play as much as it should, and everything gets a little scattered. I guess the whole purpose behind it is, I think that economic development should be developing our economies. And I'm very concerned about seeing the money that's being turned over for economic development to be used plugging holes in a budget. And I have a feeling that's what we're going to be seeing. So I think the economic development portion has not accomplished what was intended, or at least my beliefs in what the intentions are. And I guess from my perspective, it should be creating some measurable results in some way, shape, or form. But there was not a consensus by any stretch of the imagination to put a definition on it at the council level. So I don't see that happening. The different councils that come along are probably going to have very different views on what economic development is. And I think the frustrating part is that a lot of it will be based on the city's economics. And I just do not want to see it plug in buckets. I want to see it do what it's supposed to do. So.
So, I guess what I'm taking away, if I may.
Go ahead.
So
If you're getting something out of this, tell us what it is.
I think let's continue to keep it on the agenda for discussion. I think we need to understand how the council's budgeting process goes and where they end up with, so they have a little bit more certainty, I guess, in their part. And obviously, I'm having private conversations outside of here, if you will, with different groups that have different comments and ideas and thoughts. And through all of those, hopefully we'll get to a spot at some point here. I mean, I think one thing to remind ourselves is that there isn't a deadline here that's approaching. We have some time to make sure we do this and do it right. So if it's something that, this time next year we have a solid plan and know exactly what we're gonna do, it's not the end of the world, I guess.
That's a good point.
And, yeah.
Anybody have additional thoughts there?
Just one last. When we talk about the dividend, the other thing that's changed a little bit is the city, I hope, realizes that it is a fluctuating figure. And ATC could make a bunch of calls, and that whole portion would be zero. We saw, what was it, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, it was like 15,000 for the whole year. So, you know, there aren't any guarantees when we say we want to use these dollars for that, whether it's economic development or anything else. We just have to be careful here, I think.
Even if we do nothing with economic development, continue to give the dividend to the city in the formula that it is, the city has no guarantee that that is.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, city has no guarantee on it.
Okay. All right, moving on. Number 9, Commission Governance Review. How has going through all these policies worked for orientation for the three of you who are celebrating 1 year?
Good, because you don't have to look through the whole thing at one time
Yeah.
and try to remember any of it. You can take a piece.
We did this in
and sort
lieu of
break it
any
down.
other orientation for you guys, so we should just kick right into it again for another year for Gabrielle.
I think so. Because I think even maybe for Paul, it's some review, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
The people that have been here, I think it's a good review. And for other people, it's,
I was being a little sarcastic. It's a 5-year review after this. All right, we've got a couple that are coming back with edits. 1285. Nick, you made the changes that we talked about at the last one?
Yeah, the ones I think Harry put it up most of these on the first one, so 1285, we had some, most things around on the first page as related to defining of the investment officers. And then page 3 of that policy, we added the checking and savings account, and then more specifically called out those other investments that we may have. And we have the American Transmission Company at this point, so that was documented, and we can add to that list in the future if needed. And then finally, on the last page of that policy, we removed the last section that seemed to be a carryover from in the past. And then I may or not see if there's any questions.
Any questions on 1285? 1290?
1290 was a simple edit just to update the, make it effective as of a date and then incorporated the updated rate of return, or ROE, I should say.
Questions on that one? 1295 made some changes.
Yeah, so 1295, we had talked about, on the first page, about halfway down, the different types of utility reserve funds. We didn't make any changes here, but I think as we continue with commission designated fund down the road and dividend and other components, we may need to make some changes on that. So that's probably a discussion for another time. But the heart of the discussions, or I'm sorry, the changes for this one were on the last page. They're related around the M1 maintenance fund. And I did want to note that, you know, it talks about that fund is being derived from funds that come from our revenue for our capacity minus our fuel cost. I want you to keep in mind, though, that number every month actually goes back to our customers. We don't actually hold on to that cash. It goes back to our customers and helps lower the PCAC charge. So those dollars actually go out the door, if you will, and then Patty and her team are figuring out what that amount is every month and then moving free cash, if you will, or not unrestricted cash, I should say, into this bucket. So, but you can see we made some updates as it relates to overhauls and cycles and so forth to reflect what's going on right now, and then look to push the target level up to reflect if we had to replace 2 gas generators at the same time. I'm sorry, gas generators, excuse me. So welcome any questions you have.
I have a question. In this policy, it says that the MU maintains an adequate cash reserve, a minimum of 120 days of cash reserves. But the policy above it, I thought, said cash reserve for 60 days. And then comparing apples and oranges.
It's right here.
Right, so the minimum, so that's the minimum that we maintain is the low watermark, if you will. Then if you go on to the top of the next page, it shows the target is 250 with a goal of getting to 300.
Okay.
There's also, within the cash holdings, you have those that are invested in the CDs and other items, and those that are liquid, like in our savings account. So I think that also plays into those numbers as well. 120 is part of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was just confused because it had two different numbers.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
two different policies. But, I didn't know if there was a difference.
You mentioned 60. Where was the 60?
It's in the previous policy that we looked at. I thought. Actually, it's the second, it's the one before that. On investments, under maximum investment.
These 60 days of cash holding and liquid investments. That's what you're referring to about the short-term investments that are liquid versus cash commission.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. That is right. So 60 days of our cash is held in those accounts that are very liquid.
Okay.
Anything above that then can be invested in something that's longer term, up to 5 years max.
Yeah, and the difference between the 120 days and the 250, 300 days in the other one, 120 is red line, never below. 250 to 300 is what we're trying to accomplish to meet the rating agency's goals and help the city out with their debt rating also. Okay.
Okay.
So
Is there any questions, any other questions on that one?
approval on those three.
Is there a motion to approve those three red line? By Natasha,
I'll
second by Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Those are good. Moving on to the little pile we have left. Number 1300, payment in lieu of tax and dividend policy, the pilot. Did anybody see anything in here that needs to be updated or changed? That was pretty easy. If not, 1310, donations. Is there anything in 1310 that you felt needed a quick look?
The commission fund is a different policy, is that correct?
Commission
Commissioners.
designated fund has, this is what it was, funds would be used for, where their source is isn't addressed.
I think the commission designated fund was defined at one time within the dividend policy, but when that policy changed last year, we lost the source, so that went away. The commission designated fund is still established in the cash reserve policy, which has funds. So there's funds there, but there's no new revenue, I guess, today.
And that's, we're planning to bring that up, right? I thought we just say we're going to bring that up as an agenda.
Like Nick said something
Maybe
about
Nick
dealing
said
with
that.
that in a future meeting perhaps.
Yeah, I think we have to, the economic development conversation has to get to some form, maybe form, some level of certainty, and then that can help restructure that.
Sure.
Relook at all of that.
Nothing else on donations, number 1312, resolutions and ordinances. Thumbs up, I like that. Number 1315, public bidding and job orders.
I have one question that might just be a spelling error. In the Under the policy statement, in the second paragraph, it says public construction consists of the following: activates, including but not limited.
Yep.
Should that be activities?
Nothing in the change that happened in the ordinance affects this.
The last sentence, I think,
Job
is city.
orders needs to be updated.
Job order, yeah, where our portion's over $1 million.
So we'll need that to be brought into alignment with the new ordinance, with the updated ordinance. $1320 whistleblower protection. $1325 rate cases. There's a water rate case going on right now, correct? That's a full rate case.
Like the last sentence, where it says that we also would apply to a rate decrease.
Yes. Yeah, rate cases could result in a decrease. Emails Nick's been sending us with the rate increases going around the state, they're not indicating decreases.
I didn't see it.
All right, any changes for that last one? Okay. So we'll have the one come back next time. Right.
And then we'll pause until the first of the year to bring back one.
The 5-1, yeah.
1/5.
1/5.
Yep.
All right, digging right into the new year, the first review of the capital budget.
All right. The capital budget is the same format as in past years, with the summary of capital additions history on page 2, which shows the actual and budget by department going back to 2021. The total capital budget for 2025, as it is right now, is 4.56 million. At the bottom of the summary page, there are graphs of the capital additions for these years, as well as the depreciation built in to the rates compared to the budgeted capital addition. The water capital additions includes carryover of 128,000 from 2024 for the main replacement program, and that's an estimated amount based on project changes from this year. The actual budget detail items then are shown on pages 3 through 6. Each utility has its own detail, and then page 7 shows that we will not be issuing any revenue bonds for 2025 to finance the capital projects. And then page 8 would show the forecasted major projects through 2030, and then potential major projects are listed at the bottom of page 8. Any questions on that?
Normally, this would be a first look and then come back at least once, if not twice, for your questions and fine tuning. So today's kind of that very high level. There's something on it that you know.
Not, but, on the graph on the right, depreciation and rates versus budgeted capital expenditures, refresh my memory, what exactly is that?
Sure, so when we go in for a rate case, there's revenue, there's expenses, and then there's depreciation, big buckets, if you will.
Yeah,
Depreciation is what we use to set our capital budget.
okay.
So you will note that on the water side, communications is kind of an animal by itself, and you'll notice when you get in there, the budget there is more, the system is small and well, in good spots, there's not much there. On the water, you'll notice that the depreciation is in rates is less than what we have in the rate case. However, Patty and her team Patty and Melissa put together a forecast based on what we submitted for the rate case. So we expect that rate case to go into effect sometime in the first quarter next year. So we have that forecasted depreciation, so we allow the water budget to go a little bit higher. On the electric side, we try to go the opposite way, but I won't get into all the details, but essentially the electric budget is on line with what the target is as well.
Big questions for the capital budget? You'll see that one again next month. Do you want to give us the O&M budget?
Sure. For each utility, the O&M budget shows the income statement first and then the more detailed pages after that. The income statements include 2021 through 2025 budget and include the calculated rate of return versus the authorized, and also service coverage. There are graphs at the bottom of the income statement pages, and these show the operating expenses in the rate case versus adjusted for inflation versus what we have in the budget. And then there's also a graph showing the actual versus authorized rates of returns. Would you like me to go through the additional pages at all? It's up to you guys. Just a quick, okay. So then after the income statements would be kind of some assumptions that we used in the budget and also a graph showing historical sales. Then we have the other electric or water revenues, depending on which one you're looking at. These are kind of the, not the sales, but some of the other revenues. And the page after that shows the distribution expenses, the percent of the total budget based on kind of category. Then you'll see the detail of the O&M expenses, and then a breakdown of the depreciation, amortization, and taxes, and then it goes into the water budget and then communications. So it's the same format for all of them. Page 24 is going to show a list of kind of major expenses that are included in the budget. And then the business plan narrative would be the last portion of the budget.
Okay, so same thing. This is big questions that we have in the first look at it.
And again, we have targets that the departments are given, and things are within line with those targets. They goes back to the rate case, like we talked about from the capital, but we provide a little bit of an inflationary factor from year to year, help obviously inflation and costs go out. So, and I think a couple of things to look at are just the expenses, some of the expenses that are in there, and then also looking at the rate of return that's kind of summarized on the bottom of the first page. That's really a good indicative of how we compare to what our authorized is, and the desire is to keep that number. That number over time is going to go down. It's just the nature of the beast and how the PSC ratings work. Our goal is to slow that decrease as long as we can to extend out rate cases. Or if we have economic development and generate new revenue, that also helps to extend out between rate cases. So those are the things that we're focused on. But as you can see, both the electric and water and communications show generally healthy rate of returns within the budget that's been presented so far.
So the way that the rate of return works, for those of you who haven't been through a rate case or two or haven't been through the budgeting cycle for the utility yet, is very different from the city and very different from a private business. The PSC, when we do a rate case, looks at all of the utilities' expenses the way the Public Service Commission defines expenses. And they will make sure that our rates are set at the time of the rate case to cover all those expenses and have X defined rate of return. That rate of return can be political at the state level. It's not like it's always the same. It goes up and down depending on what's happening at the state politics level or with interest rates out in the general market. So when you do a rate case, that's usually the closest you're going to be in that year afterward to hitting your authorized rate of return. And then as Nick said, your expenses will continue to rise, but your revenue, your rate of revenue is fixed, and so that's gonna bleed off. Your rate of return is gonna bleed off over time until it becomes time to do your next rate of return. Okay? Yes?
This is maybe off the agenda. I don't know. I can ask you and it'll be on the agenda, right? Do our rate cases, do we do it by inflation? Or how, how do we do that percentage?
Do you decide to do a rate case?
Or when we're applying for a rate case and they give us that, I mean, you said it was political and things like that, but does it kind of match inflation?
So it's political in the sense that the PSC would, it's not political to the utility, but I mean, the PSC might be using a rate of return of 6 this year type of thing. So when we do a rate case, it's a complete reset.
So the decision for us to move forward with the rate case is something this body will look at. We look at it at this point when we're doing the budget, we'll look at it again and after the audit, and the staff will come together with a recommendation we feel a rate case is needed. Both electric and water have what's considered conventional, whereas we give 5 under the state. Water also has a simplified, which is more of a one-page quick process, but there's some limitations on when and how often that can be used. As far as the rate of return, as Mike said, that varies over time. During my time, I've seen it as low as 3 or 4% up to now. Right now is the highest I've seen it at 6.2. When we applied, I think the authorized was 6.1 or 6.2 on water. Yeah, we're expecting, as you've seen, inflation and the Fed's increasing rates, the rates are going down. I would expect our authorized will come back in at 6.1 or maybe 6 or 5.9 as a timing. It's when they get to a point through their process and they say, all right, we're going to set it now. And that's based on benchmarks at the state level. And then they have some leeway within that benchmark based on the needs of the community.
Did that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think my overarching question is, as things get more expensive, as inflation sort of tracks, do the rates sort of track with that? Sort of like the big.
So it's lumpy, number one, because we don't do rate cases, especially on the electric side very often. It's been 6 or 8 years between rate cases. So, the revenue rate didn't change for that period of time, so you can imagine that even if all you did was take inflation for 6 years, it was a significant increase. So, yes and no.
There's not an easy button from year to year to incorporate inflation, because you have to go to the state to get them to allow us to change the rates.
Water gets the closest by using the simplified rate case as often as it's allowed. And we did that a number of times until we reached the point where we couldn't. So that's why we're doing the full rate case. I wish they had that on the electric side.
We're working on it, but it'll take time.
It was in the policy, that last one that we just touched on, but it's been the commission's policy to do more frequent and smaller increases as opposed to, so the philosophy is we'd like to do it as often as it makes sense. But the cost of doing a rate case is significant because we have to pay to put it together and we have to pay the PSC to administer it.
The piece that's been playing to this is if if we get a 6.1 rate of return rate today, let's say that interest rate continues to go down over the years to come, it may be 10 years before we go back in, because when we do our calculations, if the new authorized is, let's say, 4%, you're only getting 4% instead of 6%, so your expenses have to go up maybe twice as much as what they would have otherwise to help justify the rate case.
Highly regulated, a little hard to predict. And the philosophy at the PSC and the whole rate setting piece is about what are your costs and covering those costs and making sure that the infrastructure is paid for by the customers who are going to use it in that matching time frame. So that rate of return is really just meant to pay for the assets that are delivering the service over and above the program costs, so to say. it's not providing a profit. Even the pilot payment, which is what the city or what the state views as what the transfer to a city should be, is figured in as a cost for that purpose.
One thing I just want to note, like when you look at the first page of the budget sheets, you'll see net operating income, and that might be a pretty healthy number both for electric and water. Keep in mind that does not include principal and interest payments on debt. It doesn't include other income. So, even though it might say 3 million, we have 3 million plus of principal and interest payments. That's still got to come out of that number. So next month when we get the cash flow, you'll be able to see exactly how cash in and out looks through the course of the year.
Cash flow for the budget.
Yes,
Yes.
based on the projections in the budget,
Yeah.
yes.
We only make principal payments twice a year, so really, what Nick's saying is you'll see the big profit, and then twice a year, you'll see the real impact in the cash flow when we make those principal and interest payments. Other questions on O&M? I should have raised your hand for a second, Joe. Number 12, job orders.
Yes, so we did have one that came in unfortunately after the packet was put together. So it's job order 18215. This is County Road B, a 3-phase rebuild. This is a rebuild on County B from Highway H to Yellow River. It's a new feeder, we call it 332. This is project estimate cost was $312,879. Tony had in his budget 2 projects, one on Washington and one on Eagle, which will both be delayed. And the total note for those 2 projects was $341,250. So the cost of the project is less than what we have for budget funds for those other 2 projects.
Is there a motion to approve the job order? Mike?
Motion to approve.
Second by Natasha. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 13, bills and payroll.
Bills have been reviewed and certified good for payment.
Motion to approve bills and payroll by Paul. Second by Mr. Paschal. Any discussion, questions, comments, concerns? Bills and payroll. Motion to, all in favor? We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Previous meeting minutes from the meeting of September 9th.
I move to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Financial reports?
Included this month are the August financial statements and the September cash reports. Let me know if you have questions.
Any questions?
I would just note that the financial statement showed, we have the balance sheet and the income statement, and then you'll notice that there's some color on those. That's the continuation of the KPI. So if you go into the financial summary, the first document, it kind of gives a narrative on what the colors are indicative of what's causing them. So.
All right, very good. Number 16, approval to go into closed session for Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E, deliberating and negotiating purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session for the purpose of reviewing Upper Midwest Municipal Energy Group administrative services. We're going to delay number 17 to next month. We're just going to keep that one forward. So I'm looking for the motion for the first. By Mike, second by Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're in closed session. Take 2 minutes.